Good evening, travelers. The following terrifying tale is that of She Beneath the Tree. A terrifying viewer recommendation. It does contain murder, child abuse, and animal abuse. You've been warned. Listen at your own peril and enjoy this terrifying tale here at Matchbox Creek. The first time I remember feeling true fear was in front of that tree, an old decaying thing standing right in the center of an otherwise flat field on my grandparents' land. Its long trunk twisted and knotted around itself, its branches reaching out like gnarled hands towards gray skies as if it were in prayer. It was just a tree and nothing more. At least, that's what my father told me. I knew better than that. It was not just a tree. It was evil. Even back then, I noticed that something wasn't right about it. It was as if the grass refused to grow in a 5-foot wide circle around it. It was like none of the animals would approach it. You never saw a squirrel or a bird nestled among its black, dead branches. I can remember standing in front of it at the age of 6, my father and grandfather standing behind me talking as I stared up in a frightened awe.
That thing that I saw, Pop.
My father said, taking a few steps towards me.
Why don't you just cut the damn thing down?
My grandfather, a man still quite fit at that age, and still sporting some of the original dark color of his hair, balked at this.
Thing's been there as long as I can remember. Besides, it ain't doing no harm anyhow.
That was the last word on the subject. Grandpa said no, so there it remained. There it has remained for 20 years since. It lasted through my grandfather's sudden heart attack, my grandmother's passing shortly thereafter of cancer, my father and mother's divorce, and my father's eventual death from drinking. It's been there, and it's been cursing my family's name. I knew it then, and I know it now. I inherited the property after my father passed away. He hadn't done anything with it during the time he had it, as he had been far too absorbed in drinking and wallowing at that time. So when I got to the place, it had fallen into total disrepair. It would take some work to make it livable again, but since my girlfriend Crystal and I had been looking for a bigger place for our family, it was something of a godsend. Our son Jeffrey was 4 years old, and I thought it would be great to give him a bigger room and a huge backyard to play in. We could finally even get a dog. Something I've always wanted to do, but the crummy apartments I'd lived in hadn't allowed it. I remember walking the grounds and planning everything out in my head, every color of paint and scrap of wood I would need to get this place looking back up to the place I remember from my childhood. Then I remember seeing it off in the distance like a blight on the horizon. Its clawed branches still reaching up towards the sky in prayer, its body still rotting and twisted. I leaned up against the house and lit a cigarette while I stared at it off in the distance like it was an intruder. I closed an eye and covered it with my thumb. The world looked better without it. I decided in that moment, well, Grandpa may have wanted to just leave it there. I was cutting that fucker down. My girlfriend and I decided that I could spend the weekends up at my grandparents' place to get it fixed up for us to move in. My brother Eddie offered to help out on the weekends that he wasn't busy, but said that wouldn't be for at least 2 weeks. I considered the idea of waiting to cut the tree down until my brother could get up there to give me a hand, but the second I laid my eyes on that thing again, I wanted it gone. I backed my truck up to the field to make it easier to haul out all the pieces, and I set to work. As my chainsaw roared to life in my hand, I could almost see the twisted thing cringe. It had stood for longer than I had been alive. Today was its last time at prayer to the sky. I covered my face with a dust mask and felt a great satisfaction as the whirling teeth of the saw sunk into its surface. Chips of blackened bark and rotted smelling sawdust flew free from its knotted, twisting trunk. Some sort of black sap leaked out onto my saw blade as I worked. I could even feel bits of it fly up and hit me in the face. Even through the dust mask, I could smell it. It was horrible. I feared for a second it would gum up the works of my saw, but the raw power of the engine kept it moving forward, and the teeth of the chainsaw chewed their prey with a little worry. It took the most of the day working to get the tree down and chopped it into pieces, but knocked down and chopped into pieces, but as the sun was setting and the bed of my truck was filled with the black rotting wood, it felt worth the trouble. Left in the tree's place was nothing but a knotted up stump. The thing writhed with insects and some kind of mold. I would tear it out later when I had some help. Who knew how deep that thing had been rooted? I climbed into the cab of my truck, filthy and tired, yet satisfied with my work. That night, I slept a dreamless sleep of the dead, knowing my horizon was free of that twisted shadow. I spent the whole next day working on the main house. There was a lot to do, and I didn't want to waste my time. It wasn't until the following weekend that things started to get strange. I had been clearing out the attic of the house. It was filled with boxes of junk and old furniture. Most of the stuff was going straight to the dump, a few things to Goodwill, and the last little handful I was keeping. While I was moving out one of the keeper boxes, a box filled with old photo albums, one of the albums fell off the top and sent a couple of loose pictures sprawling across the floor. I set the box down in the guest bedroom, where I was planning to store it for the time being. I walked over to pick up the photos. They were old black and white pictures of my grandfather when he was younger. He was standing in front of that horrid-looking tree smiling. My grandmother sat beside him at the base. Fall of 47 was written on the back, but below it was something much stranger. Lekala, we seek no end. The phrase stuck a strangely familiar chord with me, although I had no idea what it meant. The photo in and of itself made me feel uncomfortable, though. There was something a little too manic in my grandfather's smile, and something a little too nervous in my grandmother's. I flipped to the next photo, and it took a second to realize what I was looking at. When I did, though, my stomach turned. It was my grandfather, this time, though my grandmother was not in frame, and instead, my grandfather was holding a rope that was slung up over the tree and pulled taut. On the other end of the rope was a dog. It had been hung by the neck, presumably by my grandfather, and it appeared to be dead. My grandpa still had that manic smile on his face. You could see it beaming from beneath his wide brim hat. I dropped the photo, recoiling from what I had just seen. It was sick, and I could hardly believe it. My grandparents had always been such kind, and the sight of my grandfather taking such pleasure in killing a defenseless animal made me sick. I steadied myself on my knees and saw the photo lying face down on the ground in front of me. It too had the writing on the back, Lekala, except the end of another. I snatched the photo up from the ground, not wanting to look at it again, and walked at a steady pace over to the trash pile I had been building up. I shoved the pictures inside one of the boxes and then returned to where I had left the other photo albums, and I started tearing through them. I came across at least 10 other sets of photos from different years. Each time my grandfather and grandmother were in one picture posed next to the tree. Then each other time my grandfather was hanging some kind of animal by its neck from one of its branches. It wasn't always dogs. There were also cats and goats. Each one was labeled as fall of whatever year it had been taken, and each one had the same chant written in 2 parts. Lekala, we seek no end. Lekala, except the end of another. I tore each photo from the albums and crumbled them up, stuffing them in the same box as the original ones I found. I must have paced in a silent shock for at least an hour afterwards. What had my grandparents been doing? Was it some kind of cult thing? Why did my grandfather always look like he was taking such pleasure in killing those animals? It started to make sense to me why that tree had felt so wrong, so evil. They had done something there that tainted that place. That night I threw the boxes in the back of my truck and dropped them at the dump on my way home. For all I cared, they could rot with the tree. I wanted nothing to do with any of it. I thought that would be the end. I would walk away and leave it alone. Just keep it to myself and move on with my life. It's never that simple though. I know that now. The whole week I was plagued by nightmares about that tree. I could hear my grandfather's hearty laugh as he yanked down on a rope and pulled those animals up to the tree. I could hear them squeal and whine as they were struggling to breathe and being strangled to death. I'd wake up in cold sweats, short of breath and confused as to where I was. The phrase repeating in my head, Lekala, we seek no end. Lekala, except the end of another. I told my girlfriend that they were just nightmares, probably brought on by stress, but I never told her what it was about. I was hesitant to return to that house, but I told myself just to forget about it. I was disgusted to learn that my grandparents weren't the people I thought they were, that they were capable of such disgusting acts of cruelty. But my answers as to why had been buried with them years ago. The tree was gone, the pictures gone with it, and the house was mine now. I could make it a home again and fill it with new, happier memories. I met my brother Eddie at the house the following weekend as he planned. My brother and I worked the next 2 following weekends without incident. It was good to spend some time with him, and with his help we were able to get the house into shape in no time. The 3rd weekend I got there on Saturday morning to find my brother staring off into the field. I walked up behind him and touched his shoulder. He jumped back, startled. "Jesus Christ, Danny. Nearly scared the shit out of me," he said, seeming to snap out of his trance. "Sorry about that. It looked like you were straight up zoned out though." "Oh yeah, just staring off into space." He laughed. "Guess I'm getting senile in my old age." "Yeah, 30 years old and all. Should probably get you ready for the retirement home." He snorted a quick laugh and gave me a playful punch to the shoulder before turning his attention back at the field. "Hey, didn't there used to be a tree out there?" he asked. "A gnarled old thing, really creepy looking." My heart sunk in my chest. I had so much fun working on that place with him that I had not thought about the tree or the photos in the past week. "Yeah, cut it down." My tone became somber. I hoped that he wouldn't ask anything else, and I think he could see it on my face. Good riddance. Thing was hideous," he smiled at me. "Let's get back to work." We spent the rest of the day rebuilding the back deck that we had torn down the previous weekend. It had been overtaken with rot and was falling apart. During one of our smoke breaks, Eddie cracked a beer and handed it to me. I returned the favor by lighting a cigarette and passing it over to him. He took a drag and coughed a bit before taking a swig of his beer. "Don't you dare tell my wife," he said, sucking down another drag. "Marla would kill me." "My lips are sealed, brother." I laughed. and lit one for myself. So, Crystal and my nephew coming up tomorrow, huh? Yep. She wants to check the place out, and I'm tired of spending whole weekends away from my boy. It'll be good to show them around. I wasn't actually sure how much I meant that. The whole place still gave me a weird vibe. I was doing my best to ignore it, yet the back of my mind it gnawed at me. This place always had a fucked up vibe when we were kids, Eddie said. Seemingly out of nowhere, he was staring at the backyard fence as if he were looking through it towards the field. What are you talking about? I said before taking another swig of my beer and giving him a raised eyebrow over the bottom of the bottle. I don't know. He trailed off a bit before turning his attention towards me. I'm glad you're fixing it up, Danny. We both sat there silently for a bit till we were almost done with our beers. My brother took down the final swallow out of his bottle and smacked his lips. Licala, the end of another, he said, before turning to me with a smile. I leapt out of my lawn chair and back away from him like he just pulled a knife on me. Whoa, brother, a beef fly up your shorts? He said with a laugh. Why the fuck did you just say that? I was now standing behind the chair, using it as a barrier between me and him. 'Cause you jumped up like a maniac, he answered, taking a step forward towards me. You okay? Not the thing about the bee, you asshole. What did you say before that? I stepped back, holding my beer bottle by the neck with a reverse grip. I said, that's the end of another break. What the fuck has gone into you? I eased my stance and leaned myself on the back of the chair. I could have been hearing things. It was possible. It felt as if that phrase had just drilled itself into my mind. I decided I may have just misheard and flipped out over nothing. It felt stupid. As far as I knew, my brother didn't know anything about what went on here, and I wanted him to remain in ignorance. Nothing. I looked up at him, forced a smile. I think I've just been working too hard, and my mind is starting to play tricks on me. One hell of a trick. His face was flush with worry. I could tell he was genuinely confused. My heart slowed down, and I finished the rest of my beer before walking over next to him and clapping him on the shoulder. Don't worry about it. And my smile came easier now. Your little brother is an idiot. Let's just get back to work. That's exactly what we did. We managed to get the whole back deck built over the course of the rest of the day. All the other breaks we took had an uneasy silence to them most of the time. I really just wanted to see Crystal and my son. I hope it would make me feel less uneasy after my little delusion. Eddie blacked out on the couch shortly after we finished the day and fell asleep upstairs in the bedroom. I think I would have dreamed about the tree that night. In fact, I'm sure of it. That is, if my sleep hadn't been interrupted a little before 4 a.m. I woke to a figure standing over the bed, just staring down at me. I was about to freak out and go scrambling for my grandfather's old 12 gauge in the closet, but my eyes quickly adjusted. It was Eddie. The look on his face made it seem as if all the life had been drained out of him. Eddie? I asked, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. What the hell are you doing? Is everything okay? She beneath the tree demands retribution for what you did. I raised an eyebrow at him. I felt utterly confused and still half asleep. Before I could ask what the fuck he meant, though he spoke again. Lekala. We seek no end. I don't want her to have you, brother. I'm sorry. My stomach twisted in knots in my chest, and I threw back my covers to jump out of bed before my feet touched the ground, though. Eddie was on me with a strength I didn't know he had. He coiled around me like a snake, and I felt his forearm press into my neck like a vice. I gasped and threw elbows in an attempt to get free, but the more I struggled, the harder he squeezed. In no time at all, the world went dark. When I woke again, I smelled earth and damp mold Dim light crossed my fuzzy vision as I coughed and weakly attempted to raise to my knees. I could hear muffled sounds in the distance, Eddie's voice, and then Crystal's. I tried to call out to them, but all I could do was choke out a cough. I pushed myself to my feet, feeling as if I'd been crushed under a ton of bricks. My eyes started to adjust and clear, revealing that I was in the basement of the house. Suddenly, I heard Crystal scream, an all too short scream before it was cut off by the sound of something thudding against the floor. This was followed by the sound of my son crying. My strength came back to me in that moment, and my legs carried me up to the basement stairs as fast as they could. I could already hear my son's cries dimming as they moved out of the front door of the house and out towards the field. I crashed into the basement door with all my weight as I shouted Eddie's name in raspy breaths. It felt like an eternity. I wondered how the old door was withstanding my hits better than my shoulder. I finally heard the wood splinter as what felt like 10 straight minutes to crashing all my weight into it, and the sliding lock broke into pieces, letting the door swing free. With no hesitation, I threw myself around the corner and into the living room, where I saw Crystal lying unconscious on the floor. Her head was bleeding, but she was alive. I needed to get to my son. Eddie's words rang out in my mind. She beneath the tree demands retribution for what you did. Images of my brother hoisting my son up by his neck and smiling maniacally as he did it overtook my thoughts. Somehow I knew that's exactly what was going to happen too, which made no sense because I had cut that tree into tiny fucking pieces. I reluctantly left Crystal, sprinted up the stairs to get the shotgun from the closet. I wasn't going to take any chances, not when it came to my son. I passed the window that overlooked the field, and I could see Eddie carrying Jeffrey out into the field. But I also saw something that froze my blood in its veins. I saw the tree, a silhouette of black against the overcast sky, its gnarled body and twisted branches reaching up in prayer, the same as it had always been. I didn't have time to wonder how. None of this made any sense, but I knew what was about to happen to my son. I hurriedly grabbed the shotgun and made sure I was loaded, and sprinted from the house. They had reached the tree before I got to them. Eddie had slung a rope over one of the thicker branches and looped it around Jeff's neck. Before I could even level the gun in Eddie's direction, he had thrown the rope over his shoulder and began lifting Jeffrey up by his neck. I lifted the double barrel and pointed directly at my brother. "Let him down, Eddie!" I screamed, my voice still raspy and painting my throat with each word. "I'm doing this for you, brother. Lekala, lekala. I don't want your end." He wasn't smiling like I'd seen in my head. Tears streamed down his face. "She demands your blood. This is the only way." I'm not going to say it again. I stepped closer to him. There was no chance of missing. I pulled the hammers for both barrels back. I couldn't see Jeffrey's feet kicking wildly in the air. One of his little shoes went tumbling to the ground. "Let him down!" Now the tears were mine. It felt like some compulsion to pull the trigger had taken me over. I could hear a woman's voice in my head.
"Lekala, lekala. Do it."
It was little more than a whisper, but it was there behind my thoughts. I stared up at the tree, feeling exactly like the first time, in the grip of true fear. "She needs a sacrifice from you," my brother screamed, his face and voice twisted in madness. "Lekala, lekala, except the..." His voice was cut off by the thunderous sound of the shotgun as I squeezed the triggers. I don't remember much after that, not much more than bits and pieces. I remember scooping my screaming child up off the ground and carrying him back towards the house. I remember Crystal running towards me and tearing him from my arms with a confused look in her eye. I remember collapsing before the police and ambulance got there. Crystal said they couldn't question me because apparently I kept saying that it shouldn't be there, that I cut it to pieces. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth about the tree though. As far as she or anyone else knows, my brother went crazy. I wish I could believe that was true. It would make me feel like less of a piece of shit for dragging his name through the mud after I murdered him. Make no mistake either, that's exactly what I did. There were other ways I could have stopped him. I've thought though, all of them, 100 times. I tell myself the reason I pulled the trigger was because I was in a panic, not in my right mind. I know though, it was she beneath the tree, as Eddie had called her. She got her sacrifice from me, in both blood and humanity. I never bothered to cut the tree down again. In fact, I decided to let the old place rot. I refuse to even sell it, and I sure as hell will never go near it. I keep hoping it'll burn down in some freak accident. I know it won't though. Hell, even if it did, that fucking tree would still be there. Gnarled and twisted, branches reaching up towards the sky, in praise to whatever power it serves.